next part is cost of goods sold. So that means next thing that item that I have to forecast is cost of goods sold, right? Now there can be multiple ways of forecasting cost of goods sold. You can simplify it, or you can break it down into component, or there are multiple ways that you can use. So simply speaking, cost of goods sold, your sales minus cost of goods sold is your gross profit. Now how will cost of goods sold increase? Cost of goods sold will increase if prices go up, right? Prices of raw material or inputs go up. So if there is an inflation, generally cost of goods sold should increase. Cost of goods sold will increase, volume goes up. So if volume goes up, cost of goods sold will also increase. Yes. So it will increase due to inflation, it will increase due to volumes. Or obviously if there are acquisition and divestiture, cost of goods sold will increase. So we are talking about total cost of goods sold, not in percentage term. So anything which impacts sales mostly impact cost of goods sold as well, FX impact or other reasons. So these are primarily those reasons which also impact sales. So as they impact sale, they will also impact cost of goods sold, and then other reason. So generally speaking, so whenever price increases for companies like Procter and Gamble, or for company, or for any other company as well, there are two impacts on, there can be possible two routes for a company. One is that it takes dilution on gross profit and GM, that is its GM percentage will reduce, or otherwise it will increase the selling price as well, and so it will sustain the GM. Or there can be another case that it increases the selling price more than the cost has increased, so GM will increase. But there is a limit to it. Why? Because if you do that, then you are taking a dip in your volume. Secondly, there are companies which have some savings plan. So generally in those management discussions, in those earnings call, company would also mention about saving plan. So they are focusing on, or they are trying to drive supply chain efficiencies. Supply chain efficiencies help you become more productive by the use of technology, by the use of efficient processes or machines, and thus improve your gross margin. In that case again, if it is working on efficiencies or driving supply chain efficiencies, then cost of goods sold will not increase at the same rate as sales, but will increase at a lower rate as sales, right? But these are the elements that will impact it. So if I have to break down cost of goods sold, I can break it down into inflation, which I have taken as it is from pricing. That is, if anything is impacting sales, if any inflation is impacting sales, if you are taking a price increase in sales, then that would also cause an increase in cost of goods sold. That is the assumption that I am taking here, inflation. Secondly, volume. If I am selling more, cost of goods sold will be higher. If I am selling less, cost of goods sold will be lower. Then acquisition and divestiture, as it is from.
Why are your values different from?
Which one is different?
What in volumes you have
In
in 2016 you have 3%.
2016 we have
2017
3%.
and cost of goods sold is
2.5. This is, I think, to 1 decimal place, and this is to 0 decimal place, right? So just the same. So inflation, volume, it is just linked from there. It can be different. So if you look into it, it is just linked. So I am not putting in any. Why am I not putting in hard-coded number? Because if I put in a hard-coded number and then I change anything from assumptions for inflation, it will not change here. So make sure that you have linked it. Otherwise, if you copy paste it or if you hard code it, it wouldn't change. So what would happen is that if later I increase the inflation assumption, it would reflect into sale but would not reflect into cost of goods sold, and my gross margin will increase. So that's why I do not hard code it, so that if you increase inflation assumption, that would reflect in sale as well as in COGS. Volume just coming in from there, acquisition coming in from here, FX coming in from here, and then after all of this you need to see what is the other impact. So if I look in 15 and 16, in 15 and 16 I see company driving up an additional gross margin or driving some efficiencies or maybe driving some additional return.
Costs of goods, right?
This is cost of so cost reduced in this year by 5.1%, and in this year then it reduced by 11.2%. There was a problem in linking, so here it got reduced by 5.1% and here it got reduced by 11.2%. How am I getting this? This is just linked to income statement sheet. So in income statement I have taken the this year's sales, divided it by previous year's sales and minus 1, which gives me the increase in cost. So increase in cost is minus 5.1%. That means cost of goods sold have declined by 5.1%. And what is the difference between this and sales parameters? The difference between this value of 5.1% and other sales parameters is 0.9%. Which means if everything had been same as sales, it should have been minus 6%, but it should have reduced by minus 6%, but it reduced by 5.1%, which means there was a 0.9% of increase in cost. This increase can be due to companies' inability to drive efficiencies. This increase can be due to increase in raw material cost or whatsoever reason. Then when I move ahead, I see minus 11.2% change in cost. That cost reduced by 11.2%, while sales reduced only 8%. So that means cost reduced by 2.2% more than sales. And how would it become possible? This can become possible with supply chain efficiencies. This can become possible with change in mix. That is, you are selling more of those products which have higher margins, and so due to these reasons you have been able to improve your gross margin. So that means in 1 year there was a dilution in gross margin, but in another year there was more than it was more than offset by an increase in gross margin. And overall, if I look into it, there is a 1.2% of improvement in gross margin. There is a 1.2% of yes, sum is 1.2. So there is a 1.2% of improvement in gross margin. And if I look at it over a longer period of time, 3 year, 4 year or 5 year, I would see an overall improvement in gross margin. Why? Because during any whenever a company is a company like PNG is operating in a which is operating in a global environment, or which have a large size and presence throughout the world, it is able to invest more in its efficiencies and it is able to drive up gross margin. So for a company to be successful, it continues to either drive up its gross margin or sustain its gross margin. With a company like PNG, which has a large footprint, it is easier to increase margins based on efficiency. Why? Because as you grow in size, when you grow in size, you have a higher leverage. And as you grow, you can buy at a lower price from supplier. You will dominate supplier. And as you grow, you can invest into technology. You can replace your plant and make it effective. So yes. So now the question is that how do we forecast future? There can be 2 or 3 ways to do that. One is that you look into management forecast. So management would have certain forecast of future. Management would have told you some plans that they are thinking to incorporate. They would have told you about some plans to improve the gross margins. Another way is that you look at the past 5 years, that what has it been able to do over the past 5 to 6 years. And even if there is no significant drivers that you see, but you do not see any challenges as well, even then you know that company will be able to improve its gross margin with slightest amount or with a small amount. Why? Because leverage would provide it with your size, would provide it with company with that leverage to improve its profitability. So based on that, you forecast future. If you do not see any particular, what I can say is any particular event happening or any particular new plan coming in or any significant change happening, you can take a baseline increase in gross margin, a small increase in gross margin. Otherwise, if you think that there is some new plan coming in, and if you think there is something coming in which will impact company's gross margin positively, significantly, then you can add that to this forecast and have a higher improvement forecast. Now the question is that should you or forecast a dilution in margin? So generally we do not forecast any dilution in margin for such companies. Why? Because only dilution can take place if there is an increase in raw material cost. And when raw material cost increases, these companies are able to pass on that cost to the consumer by increasing sales price. So generally dilution do not happen until and unless some unusual thing has happened, or maybe forex have played its role in diluting the margin.
So basically, that other reason, let's say for example, you have, like, I mean to say that it is quite subjective from every
It
angle.
will be subjective from every angle. It will depend on your analysis of company's ability to drive efficiencies, to drive leverage, and to drive productivity, or to increase the productivity.
Just one more question. Let's say, for example, if I talk it from my perspective, I would rather take a percentage increase in that column if the top line is increasing. So let's say, for example, as a percentage of top line, the total cost of goods sold, excluding this line, as a percentage of top line can be assumed in this one.
Total cost of goods sold.
Yeah, excluding this. Let's say for in terms of growth.
You can do that, and if you think that there will be
Basically,
no
the idea
significant
behind this
changes.
is that if the top line is increasing, then why not? Then a basic assumption would be that the cost will increase.
Cost will increase. Yes, so cost is increasing. Cost will increase. So if you look into it, cost is actually increasing.
No, cost is increasing, but that is the net impact. No?
This is the net impact. So cost is increasing
I'm not
except for
talking-
1 year.
No,
Yes.
I'm not talking about the net impact. The line before that, the other reasons. You
This one.
You have taken an assumption of minus.
So this is for driving efficiency. So if I think that company will drive efficiency, then in addition to volume pricing, after taking into account everything related to sale, everything related to sale is covered in this column. So after taking into account everything related to sale, I have taken an additional thing, an additional variable, that due to company's ability to drive up margins or to sustain margins, it will increase. Secondly, another thing would be that if commodity forecast is, for example, inflation, or let's say volume forecast turns very high. So what would happen? So if volumes are very large or volumes are growing at a very high value, then company will be in a better negotiation power with the suppliers. So company will be able to procure product at a maybe lower price, and through that it can increase the margin. Or let's say that volume has increased, but company has made its warehouse much efficient. It has cut down the inventory. So warehouse management cost will decrease. So it will drive efficiency. So in any case, if you look at any company's business plan, mostly until and unless something is unusual, any business plan will not show you a dilution forecast. It will either show you an increased forecast or a sustained forecast. So this is about cost of goods sold forecast. Now I have introduced another color with italic font, which is blue. So in any row, assumption is that formula should be same. If in any row I have different formula for any cell, I need to mark it, so that when I am looking at the model for the first time, or I do not know who made this model, just looking at this sheet, I would know that these two cells have different formula, these are different. These two cells have different formula, these are different. So if there is a different formula being used in any particular cells in a row, then you should use a different color. Otherwise, you wouldn't know what is the formula in the row. Otherwise, simply formula throughout row should be same. So your focus should be on trying to keep formula same throughout the row. Otherwise, identify it as with a different color. So if you look into it, I have pulled in cost of goods sold here. So it is just coming in from uh, net sales column. Then net impact. Net impact is simply this year's COGS divided by previous year's COGS minus 1. Net impact, net impact. Then based on this net impact and based on these sales changes, I have calculated other reasons. And based on this total net impact, now I have forecasted future. Is it clear? This is simply previous year's cost of goods sold multiplied by 1 plus growth rate. 1 plus growth rate.
Workings also you've done it over here.
Yes. So just to have an idea about it, so I have pulled it in here. Otherwise, I can directly connect it with income statement as well. But just to have the number in income statement notes for better analysis, I have pulled it here. Any problem so far? So I have done net sales forecast. I have done cost of goods sold forecast. These two are the most important one. Other ones are very easy or pretty much straightforward. There is not much of a change in other forecasts. Let's just save it. There was a problem in this link which I have fixed. It was 7 and 8. This is 5. Okay, so we are done with cost of goods sold forecast. Now we are moving on to SG and A. So here we had macroeconomic, in which CPI, we had CPI and GDP growth.